what all to get into. These are the things that you guys are like, okay, so when we started, so you can keep generating.
Double check, it's just start streaming, right?
I think it's just hit start streaming.
Start recording on the YouTube, but I don't need to do that.
Exactly, right, too cool recording. Got it.
Yeah, we'll see, and if not, whatever. Okay, so welcome everyone, especially you since you just walked in. My deal is to talk about stuff for the next hour, and then we're going to practice for the next 2 hours. This is, you're the only one that hasn't been to one of these so far, Leo. So basically, I'm speaking as much as I can from my experience and trying to kind of relate a lot of different stuff together in a way that hopefully is useful to y'all. And you get to take something that will benefit your relationships away from it. The idea is that you take whatever I say and kind of run it through your own system of like, does this make sense? Does this fit? As far as I can tell. And it's not to assume that I'm right or to agree with me or anything like that. So we've been doing, also this is recording. If you don't want to be on the recording, just don't say anything or walk in front of this little screen here. But otherwise, definitely speak up if something doesn't make sense. If you've got a question or a challenge, I think it can be really fun. Even though I'm talking, it'll be interactive. So we've been talking about, there's this great shorthand from the integral model that describes, I guess, the human experience in these big categories of waking up, growing up, cleaning up, and showing up. And we did grow up last month. That's kind of psychological maturity, just like you think of a kid growing up to an adult, but then levels beyond that. We've been doing this past month waking up and even questioning what the hell that even means. And it's always kind of vulnerable for me to talk about because, I don't know, like it means so many different things to different people. I'm like, who the hell am I talking about like waking up? I know a lot of things, but like it's such a strange, it's hard, I don't even know where to begin in some ways, and I've got like a million things that I can say. But ideally, we're also talking about how it relates to relatefulness or our relating practice, circling, the way of being honest and empathetic with each other. So one of the main things I think that's kind of paradoxical is that we, in this practice, we bring a lot of awareness and attention to the self, the experience of having emotions, having thoughts, having feelings in your body. And there's a way of doing this that I think can liberate us from our limitations of that attention on the self. And there's a way of doing it that I think can keep us stuck. And so part of what I think my motivation here in talking about this stuff is to give people the option to use this practice to bring more freedom to their lives, to be able to be more fluid, more available, more loving, more compassionate. And to notice the ways that you could accidentally use this way of being with each other to be less fluid, less free, less open, less loving, more self-centered, and actually make a stronger, tighter boundary around who you think you are in a way that makes your reactions meaner. It makes your interactions less fulfilling for everybody involved. So that's the promise. Hopefully at the end of this, you'll be like, okay, I can see how to avoid this negative thing and ways that we're all going to fall into it, right? I'll probably fall into it. I probably have 3 times already in this talk, and I'll probably keep doing it as we go. Welcome! It's been a while. So one of the things that circling does super well, I've gotten it, and a lot of you who have practiced a lot probably have seen it. You're welcome like that. Yeah. You're welcome anywhere you want, except for in this bubble. One of the things that I think happens is that we develop a real sense of presence. And you guys know this. A lot of you have had probably decades of meditation practice or practice of being present. And there's a palpable sense, sometimes people call it flow. Sometimes you just know when somebody makes eye contact with you and they're listening really well, right? It's why we get frustrated when people get on their phones at the dinner table. They're not present with us. It's easy to notice when someone's not present. And it can be harder to notice when you're not present. It can be harder to actually tell when someone else is present. And yet there's this palpable quality of just here. You're here. You're listening. You're not elsewhere. There's like there's some sort of vibe, right? It sounds very woo, and yet it's very practical. The waiter at the restaurant can suddenly, or server, sorry, it's the gender neutral term that we use these days. The server at the restaurant you can tell when they're just there with you, and it feels great. It feels great to be with someone who's present, right? So we basically train this practice of being present and doing it in relationship, or doing it in connection. And you'll notice all the different ways that, oh yeah, I started thinking about what happened yesterday, and so I wasn't present anymore. Can I bring, the first movement is usually like, let me just not do that, let me just be with what's here, and that's a really good training. And then the next movement is usually, can I bring thinking about yesterday into the present? So now I notice that with y'all, I am happy, my heart's racing, I'm nervous and tight. That's just being here. And then when I think about yesterday, I think about, I had a wonderful time rock climbing. Can I bring that within the quality of being here present? So you don't have to throw out anything about the past or the future. You can learn to incorporate it all, right? What usually happens is you kind of continuously bring your attention back to the here and now. What's it like? We use this phrase often, what's it like? It's a way of continuously being present. I'm going to write that down because it always helps to write things down. What's that like? Or what's it like? What's it like to be you is often how we start. What's that like? What this does is it basically gives you a chance to pause for a moment and look at whatever you're experiencing from the outside without disembodying yourself. So whatever you feel right now, I feel a little cold and it makes me want to turn this up actually. What's it like to feel cold? Oh, I'm looking and I'm like, I feel a sensation on my skin. I feel this kind of tightness in my shoulders. And as I'm looking, I'm both like further away from it and observing it more and more fully embodying it. There's this kind of quality of presence that I basically continuously bring my attention back to what's it like, what's it like, what's it like to be here, what's it like to be me, what's it like to be you. Over and over again, I'm continuously doing this motion. Distraction happens, I think about other stuff, I wonder, and then I come back to what's it like here and now. How am I relating to this? This is another version of this. Right? How are you relating to it? It doesn't matter which direction. It's a way of bringing awareness and attention on the present moment. So we practice this very, very specifically with the focus circling. Where we're continuously, like let's circle Valerie, we're going to continuously bring our attention back to what's it like to be with Valerie. What's it like to be her, and what's it like to be us. And so wherever the attention goes, we weave it back in. And this is a very traditional form of meditation. We call it concentration meditation in like traditional meditative practices. And basically the idea is like if you want to wake up to the true nature of reality or your identity as your true self or your relationship with God or whatever it is that you phrase that waking up to, you basically have to be able to bring your attention back to it when you forget. We all always forget sometimes. And so you have to have the ability to stay with something. It doesn't matter what, whether it's a candle flame, a breath, a mantra, a body scan, a sensation in your body, noticing with circling, noticing what's happening with other people. These are all ways of basically continuously bringing your attention back to something here and now. And in a lot of traditional paths, you start with something very physical, like a candle flame. Well, that's not that physical, like a rock. And you get more and more esoteric until you're concentrating on concentration. Or you're bringing attention back over and over again to awareness itself. So in circling, we do a really good job of having this whole spectrum. You start with, well, what's it like in your body? How are you relating to this physically? And it's that very concrete thing. You can be like, how am I relating to it emotionally? How am I thinking about it? What's the headline of the belief that I have about reality that makes me feel these ways? And you can also bring, well, how am I aware of this? What's my awareness like, noticing this? What's it like to be in awareness, noticing what's happening? We don't always bring as much attention to that in circling. I think this is one of the places that there's a huge opportunity for us. We can say, well, it's not just that I'm this being here, but I'm also aware of this being here. And that awareness is in some ways more primary. There's a sense of subjective experience that's always here. That as far as you can remember, as far as you can tell, there was a experiencing happening. And it's always been happening, and it'll keep happening as far as you'll be ever aware of. And so even as you're noticing I'm cold, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm frustrated, I'm angry that you projected on me, I don't think you're owning your experience enough, I'm also present to my experience. And I'm bringing my awareness back to what's it like to be here right now. But the thing that we do all the time is we're like, well, what's it like to be here? And I notice all the stuff, since there's body sensations, there's emotions, there's thoughts, there's intuitions, there's mental phenomena, there's all this stuff. And we keep kind of coming back to this, and we keep coming back to what's it like to be you. We keep coming back to our empathy. We're going to write you there. The thing I think happens that we can start to do more is keep bringing attention back to the looker, the subjective experiencer, right? Does it make sense? To keep bringing attention back to that experiencing, the subjective experiencer. I think this is actually the quality of waking up. And what's really cool is that the more you're able to do this, my experience is, people get scared, like, oh, am I going to be this kind of robot of stoic, meditative whateverness? But the way we practice this here is the more you're able to do this, the more flow of human experiencing comes through. So it's easier to be like, I'm upset, I'm scared, I'm frustrated, I'm limited. I really wish I could heal all my shadows right now, but I've actually reached the edge of my capacity, so I need to go slow. And I don't have to prove to you that I'm the best circler anymore or the most awake person, because I actually realize that there's this infinite isness that's aware of stuff that I am. And so this limited self that is happening right here doesn't need to be what I hold myself to be anymore. And so in this weird way, it's like using the thorn to remove the thorn, I think is the traditional way of talking about this, where you're using sensation, awareness, personality, my personality, your personality, to actually kind of get beyond that fixed or exclusive identification with the personality. You're kind of using it to notice it and be more than that. We got a question.
Yeah, question online.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna ask, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was just as you were talking about that, it just kind of strikes me how as we deepen into this more subjective parts of our experience, or if we're making kind of hidden subjects into objects and hidden subjects into objects, and we kind of keep stepping back into this bigger and bigger subjective experience, there's a quality in that is self-relating. When you do step back into a subject, you're also relating with the self or the hidden self that you were before, in a new way. And I guess maybe is that kind of I guess that is a pretty important. I'm wondering if that skill is almost really interconnected with the way that we relate to other people's subjects and hidden subjects as well. If there's a quality of internal relating that really kind of transfers over to the circling practice.
Absolutely. I think anything we do anything we relate to ourselves as is how we also relate to the world as, and vice versa, for the most part. There's a kind of mirror effect. So if you start to notice oh wow, I'm making these subject-object moves, which is a way of saying that there's something that had me that I suddenly can now see, and in that seeing and not being had by it, I'm something bigger. Even if I don't know what that something bigger is yet, the who I am is now not just the thing that was happening to. Let's just take something like being embarrassed, right? It's very obvious. Oh, I'm embarrassed. As soon as I am able to say I'm embarrassed and name it, I'm both the embarrassment or the one that's embarrassed and the thing that can notice and name that I am embarrassed. So in some tiny way, I'm slightly beyond it, right? And that new self is slightly beyond has basically a new subjectivity that's made that embarrassment an object. That's what the question asker is referring to. The more, the real question is like, how do I relate to that? Am I enthralled by it? Am I in awe at it? Well, then I'm going to be enthralled and in awe at yours. Am I like driving to make every possible subject into an object? Then that's probably how I'm going to relate to you. I'm going to be walking around trying to coach everyone all the time, trying to make subjects into objects. And I won't be able to see that that's a subject. That need to make subjects into objects is a drive that's driving me that I can't choose yet. I can't say no to it yet. I'm driven by it. And so people will experience, some people will love it. They'll love that they constantly get that challenge from me. And some people will be like, fuck that. I don't want to be around that guy that's just constantly challenging me. I just want to be loved sometimes. I just want to be unconscious sometimes. I just want to watch Netflix sometimes. And have that be okay too. So if you can start to love that in others, vice versa, you can start to love it in yourself. It's okay. Of course I'm unconscious sometimes. Of course there's a kind of self-compassion or self-forgiveness that we practice in being with each other that we then bring to ourselves. Of course your defenses are innocent. Of course they came from the abuse you had as a child or whatever, any given you, right? And it makes total sense that you'd be so reactive when you get criticism, or makes total sense that you, anything, right? That you feel like men are the lesser sex, compared to women. And now that I see that, I can start to have a little bit more just self-compassion and gentleness towards my own critic and my own ways that I'm reactive. Because a lot of us come into this, right? We're coming into these things like, I want to grow, I want to get out of my blind spots, I want to heal all that pain, and that's its own blind spot. That's its own wound that we will never heal unless we see it for what it is, and start to be a little more gentle. Yeah, sure, go try to heal some stuff, no problem. Also, sometimes don't. And so we get to do both when we relate with each other. We get to be, let's have a new insight. Let's see that you're having an insight, and it's probably reflecting an insight in me in whatever circle I'm in. And sometimes let's just enjoy what it's like and be in awe and wonder. And this is kind of the natural state, I think, actually, when you bring your awareness, do that movement back over and over into presence. You're like, come on in. When you bring that awareness back into presence over and over again, you'll notice there's a quality of presence. There's a sense of, and you can do it right now, right? There's a sense of, whenever you start to be present to something, there's often a sense of kind of interest, a or an right? And it doesn't matter what you're present to. It could be internal movement of your ankle. It could be external movement, and then you can be like, movement. Never thought of movement before. I've never thought, I felt my ankle, but I never thought to feel the movement. Feeling the feeling of movement itself from the inside. And there's just kind of this infinite possibility, right? I can feel movement, and now I can feel every possible body moving, every part of my body. And that's one tiny thing out of the infinite sea of things I can feel and look at. And the world's constantly changing, so then I've got this infinity of stuff to pay attention to, and then I can start to feel this kind of awe, this potentiality, this movement, this pleasure and joy and wonder of being. It seems to me an inherent property of presence. And in a way what we're doing now is being present to presence. What's it like to be present? What is presence like as you right now? And so presence is kind of self-aware as itself as you. And you can start to apply this to other stuff. I'm present to you, even if you're not self-aware, or I'm present to the green on your clothing, and I'm or whatever color, men are obviously often colorblind, so the green on the couch, I know that's green. Is it not?
Are you colorblind, really?
No, but the way your face when I said green, you laughed, I was like, okay, maybe you would call that some other color that is not green, something teal or something like that. So I was just like, all right, Let me back out of that hole. I think I just dug myself. Oh. Yeah, I forgot why I was saying any of that. I don't know if it mattered. Where are we at? How are we doing?
Being present to presence.
Being present to presence. What's it like? Yeah.
It's a little bit of a mind fuck.
Yeah. Totally, right? There's something amazing about it. Like, it's definitely a mind fuck because the mind's job is to separate things and like draw distinctions. It's so important, so good at doing that. And there's something about presence that is indistinct. And so you're kind of like being present to presence, which is a distinction, which is leading to non-distinguishment. So and you're like, okay, I'm now green, self-aware. What? Like I'm the presence of green, self-aware of myself here and there, or something, and it like starts to get all fuzzy and funny and weird. And that's part of the reason why people are like, man, I don't want to have this story. I don't want to bring too much story. I don't want to bring too many details of my life into this relating practice. And I think that's kind of like the step I talked about of going back to how you felt yesterday. There's a really important movement that people need to be able to drop the story and just be, oh, I wanted to tell you about this, but actually I'm just happy that we're here together. And then ideally you find a way to re-include all that stuff. Really happy to be here together. And I'm happy that I get to tell you about whoever I've been dating or whatever it is. It's really exciting to talk about what's been happening at work, and you get to include that. And I think there's a journey of waking up to that as well. Right, there's a journey of that even in the focus circling, where you practice bringing your attention back, and your ability to like the thing that you can include here gets wider and wider, right? Like first I'm like, well, what's it like to be with Stephen? And I'm sharing stuff, and then maybe Alex says something, and I'm like, well, at first I maybe push him out. That wouldn't be great circling, right? It's like, well, that doesn't really belong here. What's it like? Eventually I start to include that. Well, what's it like to feel that with Steven? Or Steve, what's it like to have Alex's attention elsewhere? And then the width of what I conclude gets wider and wider and wider. What's it like that no one here is paying attention to you and we're supposed to be what's circling you? What's it like that I don't want to be circling you while I'm circling you, right? And so there's or even I start to include more and more of the context of what we're in. How's it to be me to be doing a fake example and pointing everyone's attention to you while I'm giving this talk, and it's just we include more and more while still having that direction, that movement back. And the same is true as far as I can tell with this waking up. We get better and better at recognizing the nature of being as it is. There's just happening. And there's an experience of experiencing it happening right now, definitely here, seemingly as all the stuff that's happening as well. That's all I really know for sure. And then now I'm like, given that, it's all included. And so I can start to bring stuff back into that awareness without losing it. I can start to say like, oh yeah, notice I'm fiddling with my wedding ring, and that's a nervous habit. And there's nothing special about that. It happens to be what the leverage I have on experience right now. The focus is here. But it's just as interesting, meaningful, present as the face over there and the writing right there. The real opportunity is that most of the time we're doing these practices to ourselves, and now we get to bring words to it and relate with each other. So we can talk about the weirdness or the mindfuckness. And instead of having, you can just sit in the awe and wonder, that's absolutely great. And you can bring it in. That's part of how we're relating now. It's part of what's meeting each other in space-time. is presence, being present to presence as these 12 souls, or how many we are. That was a good estimation. How are you doing? Thoughts, questions? Online? No? Okay.
I think for me, when I say mindfuck, it's this quality of like being slippery.
Yeah.
So I might, for a moment, get a flash of, oh, I'm the noticer, not what's being noticed.
Yeah.
But then it kind of like, you know, ice sliding around in a bowl of water.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is the quality of slipperiness is, I think, why, like, what I get so excited about this movement. It's like constantly coming back. A lot of people in a meditation practice are often like, oh, I couldn't ever meditate because I couldn't stop thinking. And I'm like, it's not about stopping thinking, it's about shifting the identity of who you are from the thinker to the one that's aware of the thoughts. And you can do that whether you're thinking or not thinking. Doesn't matter, right? And so the practice of bringing your mind back to a candle or a mantra or whatever is essentially continuously being like, oh, I'm not the thoughts, I'm the awareness, I'm the empty thing. And so the slipperiness is that continuously going back into thought, right? Like, or into something, into an identity that's limited to this body. And even though I can pop out of it for a moment and then I get contracted again and I lose myself. Ironically, I lose my larger self into a smaller self in a certain sense. And larger in this sense is really just like, it's a weird word, but more wholesome, more inclusive, more all in or something. Yeah.
There's something like the slipperiness is so omnipresent that it's amazing that we lose sight of it.
Yeah.
That it's amazing that there's something that feels sticky and solid. Like in a sense, that's kind of a miracle that there's something that feels grabbable, given the slipperiness that's always there.
Yeah.
Kind of noticing the slipperiness sort of feels like, oh yeah, back there again.
It's one of the ways one of the subjects you can make into object is this forgetfulness or slipperiness. I keep forgetting. I keep showing up to the circle and expecting to stay present and then getting pissed off or trying to get everyone to like me or whatever. You know, like those are examples of ways of forgetting, right? Oh, I need you to like me to be okay, even though I know that I'm totally okay whether you like me or not. And that's the slipperiness, that's the forgetfulness. And then you can start to pay attention to that as a phenomenon that is another object that you notice. And one of the moves that we're doing over and over again is recognizing that all phenomena are just phenomena. All phenomena have witnessing to them. And so no matter what the fuck is happening, there's always an empty, open, loving presence of witness there. If the phenomenon is forgetfulness, if it's making distinctions with your mind, if it's egoing, if it's the obvious phenomena like stuff in your body, your emotions, those are all happenings that have this open yes to experience, always omnipresent, always. And you can always turn and look at that. And you can always use whatever the phenomena is, however complex, however simple, to then turn into that wider eye and allow yourself to remember that that's you too. Maybe that's all you are. I don't know. But at a minimum, that's also you. Yeah?
Would you be able to, in just like maybe 2 minutes or something, do a like almost sort of an example of like like some sort of transmission or a guiding of like what this, like bringing us into that quality of being aware of awareness?
Yeah.
I think that as a mental concept, it's intriguing, and I think that I've experienced it before, but I'd be curious if you could like guide us that a little bit more experientially.
So you can always the first thing is that it's like always here, right? And this is the basic insight of circling. Essentially, is that you can always bring your attention back to relationship. What's it like to be here, you, right now? So right now, you're asking a question. You're like, can you give us a demo? So there's like a bunch of phenomena happening, right? One is that you're asking a question. Another is that there's a voice coming through a computer. Another is that you're hoping for insight or examples. These are all just random phenomena happening, not random, right? But they're just, let's just say they're phenomena, they're data in this infinite stream of data experience. And we can notice that. Right now you're nodding. I'm saying stuff. There's noise, there's light, there's movement of my hands. It's all just stuff happening. There's stuff happening. And for some reason, I don't know why, but we can just look and notice that you're aware of that happening. We're not looking at the reason, we're not trying to explain it. We're just noticing the simple, like, phenomenological fact that you're aware stuff is happening right now. And I would love it if you could prove me wrong that you're not aware. I mean, good luck, right? This is a great way to become aware. Like, try to be not aware right now. So now you're noticing as you try to not be aware and you try to push away from something, you'll notice your awareness. Fuck, I'm aware that I'm trying to push away from awareness. That awareness is it. Boom. Now what's that like? In every single moment, something is going to come, something could come up and you still have it. So wait, but Jordan, it's so simple and annoying and it's just bullshit. Right there, you're noticing something. You're noticing that it seems like bullshit. What's noticing that? What's aware of that? So I now turn towards it. You're aware of it. It's metacognition. There's another object. It doesn't matter. As soon as you put a label on it, there's another object that you're aware of. And there's not kind of an infinite recursing thing. I don't know how to explain this logically, although I probably could if I thought long enough about it. But it's more like it's more like if you build another story on a building, the building is still in space, right? And when you turn and look at the sky, you're still looking at the sky, no matter how many edifices you put on top of it, right? Or another way to say it would be like, there's always a background, no matter how much shit is happening in the foreground. Another way to say it is like, there is even just this room, like, is full of silence. Every single one of us could be talking right now, and there would be an infinite amount of silence that could allow for more voices, as far as the space is concerned. Maybe we couldn't hear it, maybe we would clip out or something, but there's infinite room for voices in this space. And so there's a sense of like, well, let's look at the space, let's look at the background, let's look at the noticing, let's look at the awareness and point it at itself, and then start to see, well, what's that like? Another way to say it is as simply as possible is like, what's it like to be existent? Not necessarily what are the qualities that exist right now in your body-mind system, but what's it like that you exist? That you're here. What's here-ness like? Does that help? All right, guess.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, and there's a kind of an infinite exploration here. You can feel the quality of it. You can feel when you lose it. And of course, yes, all the language kind of bounds things in a fake way, and yet it's still useful, right? Like if I'm pointing to the space and I'm like, it's infinite. Infinite is defined next to finite, and yet it's still a helpful way of pointing to a felt phenomenological reality. And part of what's helpful is that one thing that's exciting about it is I'm like, the more you wake up to this thing, I think part of the reason I'm excited to share, like I said, is that like I want to bring more of this into our relating. I think it's very, very meaningful. I think it's kind of simple, even though it's complex and it sounds mystical, and it is, and all that's true, but there's something very simple and fresh about it. It's just kind of, you're here. When you say I, there's an awareness there. You're collapsing around something and you're aware of stuff. And we're looking at that awareness. That one wasn't very helpful. Scratch that from the record. But so what's cool is that I think the more you can step into this and recognize, you can remember, oh, I can bring that attention, like the same way I do this. What's it like to be you, Steve? What's it like to be anyone here? What's it like to be in the circle? The same way I do that. What's it like to be with the candle flame? I can bring my attention back to this presence, this awareness of awareness. I can just do it over and over and over again. Every time I notice, as soon as I notice I'm out of it, that's another phenomenon, another data point that I can look at and look at the looking. As soon as I notice it, I'm already looking at that data point as a looker, a kind of self-aware looker. And we'll come right back. So what I'm excited by is that the more you, one of the things I'm excited by is the more you can kind of be as this, the more spaciousness there is for stuff to occur in your body-mind system. And so the more you actually get to clean up your shadow elements, the more you can make these subject-object moves. Because most of the time when we're like, most of the time we're attached and fixated on the thing that gets in the way. Like we have a blind spot, usually for a good reason, right? And so there's something that it feels painful to get the feedback that shows us something that we hadn't seen before, because we're attached to the version of us that was seen as not having that. And when you can be this wider, infinite, open, loving awareness, there's less attachment, and you can widen that self out, right? So you're like, I never want to be seen as a judgmental person. And then you widen as this presence or awareness of awareness, and you're like, oh, it's fine. It's totally, absolutely fucking fine. Of course I'm being judgmental. And now I can show up as my judgmental self in a kind of curious, open way. Like, wow, I'm so surprised. I've always held this identity that I'm non-judgmental, and here I am judging you. I wonder what that's about. And there's suddenly room to play and investigate and get curious, and you can start to unseat those deeper layers that give rise to the judgment you could never get to when you weren't willing to allow yourself to be seen as flawed, imperfect, judgmental, insecure, vulnerable, weak, strong, ecstatic, peaceful, loving, kind, any of those things that are like, I'm not allowed to be this way, and so I can't allow myself to be seen as that. All of that gets room to be expressed, and then we can look underneath it. What's going on there? And so we stop reacting to stuff, and we get much more flow and freedom to just be with what's here. And you'll notice the more you do this that you'll be like, wow, I used to always feel like I needed to say something, and now I just don't. And it's part of what we're practicing. It's like somebody's like, hey, and you're like, man, I just don't have any reactivity to this. That's so weird and so cool. And all right, maybe I'll get curious, or maybe I'll see if there's impact in me. I don't know. See what happens. You know what you want to say.
Oh, you may have already answered it. But the question was going to be, I'm hearing you describe sort of that I in relation to, whatever is arising in me. But I'm curious if you could say more about what's the potential for being in that I when others are there as well. Like how does relation even happen? Like relation even happen when everyone is sort of like somehow not slip sliding back into the I feel mad or.
How does water relate to itself when all the ice cubes have melted? It's kind of like what you're saying?
Maybe.
Well, I mean, yeah, like we can kind of play with that, right? Because there's a sense that it's here, even if though you're slipping, you can notice it. You can notice you're noticing. I can notice my noticing, and there's a sense of like I'm all the stuff. I'm all the stuff happening, and I happen to be occurring over here, noticing all the stuff happening. And there's this kind of fresh, exciting movement of just, I can name stuff and notice it, see what happens over there. And you notice what's happening over there, and there's a playfulness, there's a interest, there's a joy. I might start crying, I might get worked up, but I'm not tied up as it. And so there's like a movement through that. I think we've all felt this in moments of flow. It's one of the reasons why I like this term flow from the flow circles. Like there's a sense of that you're beyond the happening and you are the happening. And you're relating. Maybe it's in a sport where you're like, you're like almost like watching yourself pass the ball, or for me it'd be like lacrosse or frisbee or something, You're like, and you're amazed at how it works. And so there's a relationship, right? You're passing the frisbee with other people who may or may not be in that flow. When they're in that flow, there's an incredible joy. It's like, it's double amazing. Or even like, I remember one time, I managed the bar on campus in college, and I would get in these, it was the place to be. And so it would be absolutely packed. It would just be like slammed at the bar, and me and my bartenders, like there was a couple of us that had worked together for like a couple of years, and we would get in a flow state. I remember one time specifically, like I just like had this intuition, and as my friend was like opening his hand to ask me for a rag, I like tossed it to him. Like maybe I saw the beer spill or something, and it was just like, boom, like it was like perfect. He caught it perfectly. It was like telepathic bar spill cleanup communication, right? Like it was so, and we were just like, it didn't even until, because it was in the flow, until afterwards, like, wow, that was amazing, wasn't it? So it doesn't matter what it is, right? It can be literally at the bar. I'm sure we were both drinking too. Like, don't tell the authorities of 2006 or whatever. We were drinking on the job, but in any case, boom. There's this quality of that's the kind of relating that can happen. But I don't want to put too much like excitement or goodness on it, because there's also the quality of like allowing so much more into being, means allowing incredible amounts of discomfort, incredible amounts of like, oh wow, there's so much that I wasn't I wasn't living up to my ideals. There's a movement towards forgiveness, I think, but there's often it's moving through a ton of shame, moving through a ton of guilt, moving through, and maybe you're both upset and you're like aware that you're projecting on each other. Everyone is, and it's uncomfortable and it feels good and right and it's in the flow, but it doesn't mean it's easeful or it's graceful. Yes, but it doesn't mean it's pleasant necessarily. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
It's interesting. On the comments online, somebody said, listening to a powerful conversation yesterday, a podcast Brene Brown did with the author of Peak Mind. The podcast is about finding focus and owning your attention. It's part of what's interesting about this to me is that it's becoming more widespread and more wide known. Right?
Yeah.
It's just in the environment. You try to talk about mindfulness 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Very few people know what you're talking about. Now, it's commonplace.
Yeah. And the key thing is like, in terms of waking up, it's like who's being mindful. So another way to ask the same question, it's like over and over again. It's like it's almost like who's the I that I'm referring to. Right? I'm saying I all the time. I've just said it probably 15 times in the past 30 seconds. Like you're saying I all the time. There's a movement of self-referential. What self am I referencing? So if unfortunately, like I love the movement towards mindfulness, and that's why we're looking at relatefulness as this way of describing mindful relating. It's very, very powerful, and for whatever reason, one of the ways that we've made it well known in culture is by attaching it to an individual I. And part of what this practice of relating does is say, like, you're never just that. Yes, you're an individual I, and you're always in a relationship. And you start to wake up to that, wake up to interconnection, wake up to that you're a sum and a product as much as you are a piece, a part. You're interdependent all the time. And your interdependence is a much larger determining factor in who you are than your independence, really. And that's wonderful. It's something you can welcome and open up into and surrender into. So yeah, the mindfulness thing, the one thing, it's just always something to be watching out for. It's like, am I claiming more mindfulness? Because there's a sense in which the boundary of the self can continuously, the limited boundary of the self that keeps me from being in that open-hearted yes to all of experience is always ready to close us. And that's not something to fight against necessarily. It's something to be aware of. And then as soon as you're aware of it, boom, there's another chance to open it.
I think it's also interesting thinking about how, like, even that question, who am I, is some sort of like creative or generative sort of directionality that you're sort of almost artificially like planting in your awareness, or artificially like planting in your consciousness wherever you are, whether you're not resting in that place or you are resting in that place. Yeah, I'm just like thinking about like how there's so many ways of like creating that directionality. So like it could be with a question like that, or it could be with like a sensation, or it could be like with an object, like you said, and it's like, yeah.
Yeah, and one of the ways is to continuously.
Like this practice. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. There's a delay. But one of the ways is to continuously go to right now. Right? So it's like you're noticing this in the moment. Well, how is it right now? Who's the I right now? What's awareness like right now? Just continuously asking it. There's every time you make a theory about awareness or awakening, can you experience it right now? And then it'll fade. Actually, there's a really cool mantra meditation practice that I come across from this. I think it's like the Ascension method or something. I don't know exactly where it comes from, but they have these mantras that are very simple. You pick whatever word works for you: God, the universe, spirit, and one is like, God loves me. And the idea is not that you just repeat the mantra over and over again. You feel the feeling of spirit loves me. I'm loved, essentially. And you say it once and you feel it until you can't feel it anymore. And then you say it again. And you feel it until you can't feel it anymore. And then you say it again for however long, an hour, 2 days, the rest of your life. This is like the same kind of thing as right now, right? It's like, well, what about right now? And you stay in the right now until you can't anymore. And then you bring your attention back. Well, what about right now? Who's the I right now? So maybe for you, who's the I, it doesn't work. It's much more like the body. So what about right now for the body? What's happening?
The one that seems to work over here for that is like, where are my edges?
Boom, where are my edges? Another way of looking at the I, right, is that I seem to say that there's a limit to me. And most of the time I'm like, oh, it's like at the end of the skin, But sometimes I'm like, oh no, it's the energy of like my personal space. Or sometimes I'm like, oh, well, actually I can see my influence. Like Stephen and I, share the same language. We've influenced each other. So wait, where am I actually? And I start to feel the self boundary that is just here. Remember, we're not necessarily like saying, oh, you should just merge with everything, but that I'm not just that. It's the just exclusivity, right? Like the waking up comes obviously from the metaphor of dreaming, being asleep, and when you're in a dream and you when you're in a dream, you are the character in the dream. You're just not only that. Yeah? So if I was like, oh, this is actually, I'm asleep right now, and I'm going to wake up and be like, huh, that whole thing was just a dream. Y'all are all pieces of me. I'm still a me here. I'm just not only this. And that's one of the key things I think that helps us. It's one of the key things of the relating practice that helps us so much, is that you don't have to get rid of the I. You just expand beyond it. Getting rid of the I is so scary. I mean, yes, a lot of the things you think you are gonna fall away upon closer inspection. Pretty much all of them don't stand up to scrutiny, and yet pretty much all of them also will persist anyway, right? Like, am I my body? No, and until you tell me otherwise, like, this body persists and does stuff that this consciousness, utilizes or whatever. And so you're not, like, you kind of lose the exclusive identity without losing the utility of the thing. And that's part of what we're doing is practicing relating with each other. It's like losing the exclusiveness of Graham without losing the utility of Gramming. You can't not Graham. So you get to say yes to that, and then find ways to be bigger and more than that, while including whatever it is that's there.
But it is interesting that sometimes people lose track of their own identity.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. I don't have anything to say about that. What else is going on? What do we got? Was there more online?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. Alex said, when I ask who or what is being aware, at first I want to look for a location, but it seems to be more like a process, or it just disappears and I can't see it.
Right.
And it's kind of that edge. What is that edge? It's almost like, it feels like I know where the edge is until I really look and it's, oh, wow.
And you'll notice, like, in the language, then I can't see it. So the I, there is an I. That's the key. Is like already there. Alex is like referring to something. What's that? Who's that? And as we're looking at it, like, is it the same as the thing looking at it? It's just like a way of. It's not like you're supposed to answer the question, right? You're supposed to earnestly investigate in a way that allows new experience to come forward. Like, I'm trying to think of an obvious example of where we do that. Like, well, anyway.
Zen koans
Yeah,
are all meant to do exactly that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally. Thinking of like baking and heat or something. Where like you throw something in the oven and it's not.
I watch pot doesn't boil.
more like the point of like building the heat in the oven is not to get an outcome of heat. It's to work. It's like for the work of the thing that goes into it, that changes as a result of it. And so it's the same thing with the inquiry. It's not like it's not like we're going to arrive at an answer. It is the Zen koan thing, right? Yeah. I was just trying to think of something that was less esoteric.
This is the point. Cooking is just the means.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess cooking, a lot of times it's for the fun of it. But
something that's helped me think about this when I was learning meditation was like, it's easy to associate meditation with the peaceful feeling I get after 15 minutes or so, but that's not the meditation. The meditation starts and it is effective even at the very beginning when I'm just first noticing all the chaos in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So this brings us to, I've mentioned a lot the focus circles, and so what's the deal with these big open flow circles? And part of the thing is that, like, as we train this capacity to be with something, bring over and over again, well, what's this like? What's it like here? What's it like now? And we do the same thing with, like, where the thing is not the person, but it's the awareness or the noticing or the I. What's that? Or presence itself, being present to presence itself. There's often a movement, a kind of non-meditation meditation in traditional paths where it's like, you've got the concentration, you've got the focus, you've got the support. Now can you drop the support and stay present? And can you stop meditating essentially and still be in the state of presence? And that's in a lot of ways what the flow circles are training relationally. Can you stop needing to direct attention to a particular thing and still be present in relationship? Can you stop needing a certain outcome, insight, well-being, happiness, depth, and still be present to the depth that's already and always here? And the idea, the promise, the excitement about this is if you can, that means you've got it always. And you don't need a group to be circling to be in a deep, open, loving presence. You don't need anyone to be anything. And that's like the ultimate freedom. That's the ultimate gift that I would love myself and everyone I'm in contact to have. So I don't need anything for you or from you. So I get to just, essentially I end up just loving you, right? And however that shows up. Maybe just loving you, maybe it's quietness, maybe it's honest feedback. But yeah, and I don't need you to take it, I don't need you to receive it, I don't need you to do anything. I'm just loving, or I'm just being. Being just ends up being loving as far as I can tell. But like, I simply am. And that is like that's really what we're training in flow circles, amness.
The thing that I hear you describing is like this sort of like movement towards like almost like letting go and like getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more inclusive and more inclusive and more inclusive. And I'm curious too, it's like I know that in a lot of spiritual traditions, there's kind of like a debate between like whether like metaphysically or ontologically everything is just like stillness or emptiness or nothingness, or if there's qualities there. And I guess I'm curious, like if, like once you get like, I mean, obviously like it is infinite, and I'm curious like if that's like, that to me seems like that's like has a directionality to it in some ways. And I'm also curious if there's another sort of like stroke of that where it's like you get more and more like intentional, or more and more like creative, or more and more like, okay, like I can, and like one of the things that I think has been talked about in circling before is like the quality of like wonder. It's like cultivating this like quality from the spaciousness, from the emptiness. And it's like as a means of like skillful creation or skillful relating. That like you can let go and let go and let go and let go, and that like, and then you can go to sleep. And like I guess I'm curious about like this. It seems like there's this other movement that's like, okay, this maybe a little more active or a little bit more like willful, like in relationships, that you have choice and that you have. That yes, you can experience the things that are coming up, and you can choose what to follow, and you can choose where to go with someone else that you're in a relationship with. I don't know if any of that makes sense.
Some of it makes sense. And a couple things come up for me. One is, again, like, so one thing I'm doing when I'm listening to your question is I'm listening to the content, but I'm also listening to see if there's a way that the thing you're looking for is already present, or like what drives the question. So here we are talking about presence and kind of awareness of awareness, and well, is there a kind of emptiness or the qualities? And it while I'm looking at it, I can actually answer this question experientially without needing an answer in a weird way, by looking in the moment of the asking. And I would encourage you to do the same. Rather than needing to come to a conclusion necessarily, I'm in the inquiry again. Okay, so I'm wondering if this emptiness is all there is, or if there's qualities. And let me just look at experience right now, and look at the looking. what do I find? And instead, and this is like again, it's an ongoing inquiry. It's not like, great, I found the answer is B, or the answer is 42. It's like, oh yeah, right, I know what it's like to look this, and it reminds me that every time I look, freshness occurs. I find something new. Every time I look, I'm like, I'm looking now, and I'm like, there definitely seem to be, there's stuff, for sure, all sorts of qualities. There's light, there's shadow, there's space, there's dimension, there's existence, there's whatever, there's movement, there's meaning making, and it all does seem to be made up. I don't know if that's an answer to your question or not, but I know that I like the looking, and I think that it kind of answers it in a certain way. And so this is another thing we practice in circling. I'm going to come back to you, where somebody asks a question, and it's so tempting to answer the question on the level of the content. And sometimes that's really wise. Like, don't read beneath the lines, just answer the question that's asked. Sometimes that helps you disentangle from really codependent relationships. But a lot of times, it's the case that, like, it has nothing to do with the content, right? Like, someone's basically just being like, do you care about me? And it doesn't matter what you do. If you say yes, they'll feel that. So Valerie might be like, well, or you're asking your question, and all that matters is that I acknowledge that you have a question. It doesn't matter whether I answer it or not, to a certain extent. It doesn't matter whether I'm just like, yes, of course you matter. Of course your opinion is valid. Of course you exist. And then from there, there's a total freedom to just be any which way. I can say, yeah, I'll come back to you. I can use it as an example, whatever. It doesn't matter. As long as that's the transmission, that's the thing that's coming out. And that's what we practice bringing over and over again. It's like, what are you really asking for? And I can just give that, basically. And most of the time, I don't have to think about it. The more I'm out of the way, the more naturally that flow happens. Yeah.
I don't know, it's not exactly a question, but it's the way that I understand what he's trying to say, which I debated with myself a lot, is emptiness is not nothing. And that's why it has qualities. And that's why when we say the I, and then when you say sometimes the I is I, but sometimes you say I is the I, because the I is like the part of our bodies that also is able to accept everything. So when we say emptiness, it's more the ability to accept everything and not reject, rather than being nothing.
So I can't tell right now, but my guess is that, like, can you, like, this the chat. So another way to practice this in the relating is to come from. We're often talking about, right? And we do this with emotions all the time. Oh, I notice I'm angry. Well, can I come from the anger? Oh, I'm so angry. You can feel the aliveness. There's ways, obviously, of doing this unhealthily with things like anger. But in this case, can you do the same thing? You're speaking about emptiness having qualities. Can you come from or speak as emptiness? And then notice, what wants to be said?
No, everything needs to be heard, nothing to be said.
Boom. That's beautiful. A lot of times the questions disappear when you come when you turn back to that, speaking from. This is one of the things we can do. It's kind of like that bringing back to right now over and over again. It's like, you'll notice this a lot of times. You'll have an awesome state, and there's this movement that naturally comes in. Can I hold on to this? What can I do to make sure I feel this awesome state forever or again, because I know I'm going to lose it? And the great sadness is that as soon as you try to answer that question, you're gone. And you won't get it. And so the irony is, like, but there is a thing you can do, right? And that's to just be like, right, like, how is it now? To basically turn back towards the thing that you love, instead of trying to answer the question. Well, wonder at, oh my God, there's that thing again, wanting to know the question. The answer to that question. So yeah, when it comes to, like, things like the will, and there's things you can actively do, for sure, absolutely. The freedom that we step into as this openness includes everything. It includes doing specific practices to get a specific state. It includes surrendering and letting go of that need. That's part of the reason why we don't say, we made the mistake a long time ago of kind of pretending like flow is more important or better than focus. And it just isn't from my experience. It doesn't, and that doesn't serve people anyway. And so it's like, yeah, we focus, we flow, we do it all. It's all part of the mix, and sometimes one demands the other, or you need one more than the other. And so we do that for some time, and then you shift. And again, the more you're open and about this open-hearted, loving presence, the more freedom you have to just be like, well, I don't know, for whatever reason, I've just gone this way for a long time. And it's kind of vulnerable, and I guess here we are. Or, I'm just going to switch for a second, and then we go back. And it's just this total, empty, open, loving freedom. And yeah, we do as much as we can to foster an environment that allows you to do that without needing it to be spiritual or perceived that way, right? We're all humans, we're all fucking up, we're all growing up, we're all making mistakes, we're all cleaning up, we're all learning. We all have different gifts and different things that we have to offer each other. And so the environment is like, come play, come learn, we're gonna make mistakes, we're gonna project on each other, we're gonna insult each other. Sometimes, a lot of times we don't mean it, we're gonna accidentally hurt each other. And ideally, we're gonna bring as much compassionate, wisdom to that. We're gonna learn discernment from that. But where we can then, allow more of that to kind of clear out of the way, and we can get to be more present and creative and fresh and alive with everyone that we're with. Okay, I think that's the end because people are showing up. Thank you. Any closing thoughts or comments? Okay, love you guys.
Recording stopped.
And we'll practice in about 10